Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're delighted to be in Rome, Georgia. If you'll take your seats, we are about to get kicked off here.
Did I run you off?
Reserved.
Good now.
I'll let Katie do it first. Well, thank y'all for coming this morning. We're delighted to be here in Rome, Georgia. We've got a wonderful crowd behind us to back us up, and we've got these wonderful members of the Georgia General Assembly because the Senate's not with us. And we're just waiting to hear a lot of the solutions to what's going on in the state that would help the rural areas of Georgia. And we're just delighted there. I'm going to turn it over for a moment to our co-chair here, Mac Jackson. Representative Mac Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everybody. It's just a pleasure to be here in Rome, Georgia, in this beautiful campus at Berry College. And we want to thank all our hosts for being here and all the members for coming today, and the everybody that's here. We just thank you for coming out today. Hopefully we can hear some issues that we can provide legislation for in the upcoming session. But again, thank you to everybody for being here.
Thank you so much. Representative Chairman Katie Dempsey. Katie, I'm going to call on you to introduce the mayor of Rome. I've already met him, and he even said nice things about you, so that's a plus already. So if you'll introduce the mayor. No, we haven't. She's going to introduce the president too. Thank you.
Good morning, y'all. Welcome to Rome and welcome to a beautiful morning at Berry College, for sure. It's so good to have all of you here in my hometown. I appreciate it. So it's my privilege first to introduce our mayor, Craig McDaniel, a great servant with a great servant's heart who has served our community for so long in so many ways. I want him to bring you a word of welcome this morning.
Thank you. I want to welcome you to our beautiful city of Rome and Floyd County, and it gives me an opportunity, and I've got long notes right here, so you know this is going to take a long time, but it gives me an opportunity to thank some people. I first want to thank Katie Dempsey. I think we've got the best state representative in the state of Georgia. I'm not going to take but a minute. We're like every community, we have issues with homelessness. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. Katie came to the meeting, and we had a regional hospital that got closed. Everybody's finger pointing. Why did the General Assembly allow that to happen? Why did the City Commission allow that to happen? Katie took about 5 minutes and explained that the Justice Department made that happen, and the issue went away. I haven't had that discussion anymore. She is always there. She's very calm. She has a lot of influence, and I wouldn't swap her with anybody. And we love Katie Dempsey, so thank you, Katie. Steve Briggs, president of Berry College. My background's education. I was president of Georgia Northwestern, Coosa Valley Tech. I worked there for 35 years. I was involved in economic development. If we had an industrial prospect, we took them to Broad Street. I know you saw Broad Street last night, and we brought them to Berry College. You know now why we brought them to Berry College. It's the best industrial recruitment tool that we had. Steve Briggs, I've served on the board of SACS with him. There is no one in higher education that is more respected than Dr. Steve Briggs, and he's retiring and he has had an amazing career as an educator. There is no one more respected. And I'd like for you to join me in giving him a round of applause for his career. Thank you. And we have one of our city commissioners here, Wayne Robinson, back in the back. We have 9 commissioners here in Rome. We think we have the best city in Rome. I know each of you think you come from a city, then your city is the best, and that's the way it should be. I think Larry Hanson from GMA is going to be here later today. We've got the best state in the nation, and it's because we take care of business at the local level. Home rule, manage our money well, and we're going to continue to do that. We're glad you're here. Enjoy Rome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate that. And now, Katie, if you'll introduce the president.
Got one more. I've got our county
Okay,
chairman
I'm sorry.
also, if I may.
I'm jumping the gun
so,
here.
Yeah. So my friend Allison Waters here chairs our county commission as well. She has done a great job, has lived in Rome, much like I. She married. Well, you came to Rome and then married. So, yeah, her heart is here. She's doing great work. And one of the best things is that our city and county work so well together. And the relationships that we have built also allow us to work with our state legislature as well, very much. So, Allison Waters.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you all, and thank you for being here. We welcome you to Floyd County. As Katie said, Rome and Floyd County work so well together. We have over 30 joint agreements, so we have to work well together to have all those joint agreements. We call Floyd County the place where the rivers meet and the mountains begin, and I would add to that, and where Berry College is, because we are so proud to be a partner with Berry College in so many things. I grew up, actually, I've been here 30 years, but I grew up in Lynchburg, Tennessee, which has a population of about 6,000 people. And I actually grew up about 15 miles outside of town, and I grew up on a cattle farm, 300-acre cattle farm down a long dirt road. So I have a deep-rooted appreciation for all things rural. And so I thank you for what you do for rural Georgians and rural communities. And so we're glad you're here. If we can make your visit anything better, reach out to Craig or to me. We'll be happy to accommodate you. So welcome.
Thank you. Now, Katie, I think we're ready to introduce the president.
I will. You've heard a little bit about him already. I don't want to steal his thunder. I want you to know that each of y'all have a bag in your chair too, and that's to bring you back here. You're seeing just a taste and a touch of Berry College. This is the most unique campus in our nation. It is covered and bathed in goodness that was built by Martha Berry a long time ago to help educate rural boys who had no education at that time. It has blossomed and grown to be the most amazing school ever. It expands every single year. I feel like we are hearing more and more pathways for education, for people to become employable and work in the very important fields of our state. But the beauty of this campus, if you just have 5 minutes when the meeting ends today, if you'll just go out and go through the main gate and just drive around a few minutes if you don't have time to get up, and just kind of drink it in. And you'll only see a taste of it there, because when you go back farther and farther in the campus, there's more and more and more collaboration from other partners throughout our state. So it's my privilege to welcome Dr. Stephen Briggs. It is a sad time in my heart, because it is kind of like soon he's going to leave us, and he has built so much here and made it such a, not only a wonderful school, but he's helped our community so very much in many ways. It is just an honor to have known him, to work beside him, and I treasure his friendship. Dr. Briggs.
Well, welcome. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, others. Lots of PR people up at the stage already, so I appreciate all of their goodwill and their kindness. Chairman Green, Chairman Jackson, we're delighted that you're here. We love having visitors here at Berry. How am I doing? Can you hear me in the back? We're sitting here just below Oak Hill, which is the place where Martha Berry grew up. with 7 siblings and 3 cousins. It was a big household. And Martha would be especially thrilled to have the Georgia House Rural Development Council here because she devoted her life to building up rural communities. She believed that education was the key to economic growth and job creation, and not just any education, but an education that trained the hands and inspired the heart, as well as educating, preparing, sharpening the head or the mind. Martha was born at the end of the Civil War, 1965 or 1966. We're not sure. But she witnessed the desperate struggle of many families in the aftermath of the war to find a way forward. She grew up in relative affluence, but she was bothered by the pervasive poverty and the grinding dysfunction in the many families that lived in the mountain homesteads and the small hamlets, as well as the rural farms throughout the state. And she believed that young people were Georgia's greatest natural resource, and that education was the means for restoring hope and building thriving communities. She founded her first residential school after a couple of local school experiments. She founded her first one in 1902. 1902, Teddy Roosevelt had just become president 4 months earlier when his predecessor was assassinated. So here's your first pop quiz of the day. Who was assassinated in 1902? Or 1901, I think it was actually.
Really?
Very good. William McKinley, by an anarchist up in Buffalo, New York. We forget that there were 4 presidents have been assassinated over the years. We remember Kennedy, we remember Lincoln. There were 2 others too.
That was not funny what they said. They said I was representative at that time.
Okay, so I have distracted the class already with. Martha invested her energy, her resources, her waking hours to offer students a promise. In 1900, less than 10% of adults in Georgia had a high school degree. Think about that for a second. In 1900, less than 10% of Georgians had a high school degree. We forget where we've come from. There were only a handful of public high schools in the whole state, so Martha decided to go all in and create a residential school where her students could receive an education of the head, the heart, and the hands. For her, those willing to invest in their own education, those students who, through their own hard work, their sweat equity, would come to Berry, she would provide an education and find a way forward for them in life. So the students came from hundreds of miles, convinced that this was the place, the community, that would be life-changing for them, and they were profoundly grateful for the opportunity to work to get an education. Martha Berry never went to college, but she educated 10,000 high school and college students. She started a college and was the one woman appointed to the initial Board of Regents of the state of Georgia. Martha's vision, however, went beyond those 10,000 students. Her goal was that they would leave Berry specifically to improve the communities in which they lived and worked and served, and she wanted their eventual communities and their families to flourish. That was her goal. So if you go back to our mission statement in the first 50 years, this is the mission statement up through the 40s and the 50s, it says that the purpose of Berry Schools and College is to train boys and girls from the mountain and rural districts of the South who are too poor to go elsewhere, training them for leadership and Christian citizenship in country communities. Berry's aim is to offer first-class educational opportunities by means of manual labor to those who would otherwise have no chance. The schools hold that a liberal education involves the training of the head, the heart, and the hand. It's not enough simply to know. It must be like life out of school. So a very practical sort of approach. We were originally the boys' industrial and technical school. So we've come a long way since then. You say, well, manual labor, work ethic skills, are they still relevant? In some ways, the language seems dated, but I want you to think about the room that you're in today for just a second. This room was constructed about 5 years ago by Al Christopher, class of '62. You can read about him or see his picture on the back wall there. Al was a country boy with gifted hands. He left Barry and built and started a number of construction-related businesses. He eventually owned a custom mill shop that produced high-end cabinetry for customers in the panhandle of Georgia, down close to where some of you all are from. Now in his 80s, Al still creates museum-quality wood turnings. So every piece of wood that you see in this room was cut and fashioned by Al in his shop. Every piece in this room that looks like wood or that is painted white outside was done by Al in his 80s. As a gift back to the school, he also gave a monetary gift to fund the rest of it, the foundation and the civil work and all of that. So gifted with his hands, enterprising, gifted as a businessman, Al created many jobs in his lifetime for others and served his communities well. And you're today enjoying the fruits of his education. Our students today come from all kinds of backgrounds. Many come from cities, Atlanta, major southeastern cities, Macon, all over Savannah. And we still have a heart in the midst of all that for our students from rural areas. We still have scholarship programs that allow them to work on campus year-round through the summer to gain an education with sweat equity. In fact, we still encourage all of our students to work on campus. 85% will be working on campus this semester, so that's about 1,800 or 1,900 of our 2,200 students. That's more than 500,000 hours of student work. Our work budget for students is $5.5 million. We want them working on campus, but many also venture out into our community to work in nonprofits, to help with the city government, to do other things. And we're proud of the work that they do in our schools and with our chamber and other places to make our community a better place. We have 4 levels of work, from entry level to advanced and pre-professional work. We evaluate them every semester for their work ethic, their responsibility, their communication, their teamwork, and their job-specific skills. What kind of work do we do today? It used to be agricultural and husbandry and other things. Today it's accounting, graphic design, event planning. They work in network operations and user support in IT. They work in our plumbing and electrical shops. They work in our landscaping and grounds. They work in masonry. They work with our equine and beef units and our sheep. They work in 100 different spots on campus. 8 of them work in the president's office, and they handle my scheduling and my events and all sorts of things, and we love them. They learn work skills firsthand, and that complements their rigorous academics. So we have a broad range of academics, and we still are very, we love to educate them in sort of the liberal arts and some of the core areas that they need to know, but we also love to create jobs that are meaningful in our communities, including our rural communities. So second pop quiz, what's Barry's largest major? The answer is animal science, and by a factor of about 40%. So we have lots of students in business, we have students in biology, we have students in nursing and education, we have students in communication, psychology, just a broad range of program. Our top 5 include nursing and business and animal science. Our newest program, which is going through accreditation today, this morning, is a physician associate program, a PA program, that will prioritize students and admission for students who are interested in serving rural areas. And we are particularly looking at the 12 counties surrounding Rome, up into northwest Georgia and over even into center Alabama area. We are proud to partner with our local healthcare systems, Atrium, Advent, Harbin, to provide the clinical placements for that and to recruit the kinds of students who will come and make those communities better. We're very generous. We're building a $33 million new building, which is funded through private donations completely. We're grateful for a large gift from the Atrium Foundation. There's several Atlanta foundations, some some wonderfully philanthropic people who have helped individually, especially a woman named Audrey Morgan, if you know Audrey. She's been a great philanthropist in Atlanta and certainly here at Berry. Another distinctive major here at Berry is our creative technologies major. It's one of the few of its kind in the nation. It complements our entrepreneurship program. We're working this year currently and looking ahead into the future. Even in my 19th year, we're looking ahead to engineering areas related to product design, development, and manufacturing. And again, all of that feeds into what our communities need. We're proud to partner with Rome and our local city and county commissioners to develop the Rome Tennis Center at Berry, which has been a major economic development engine here, the largest of its kind, certainly on the East Coast and perhaps in the nation. We are proud to have sponsored the Spires at Berry College, which is a full comprehensive retirement community that's brought 180 independent adults, along with 100 medical beds to the community. We've worked with the city on developing a Fairfield hotel to support some of our tourism here. So we love partnerships, but at Berry, our students come first. So we care about their sense of purpose, their direction. We care about their character, how it connects to their life interests and professional development. We want them to decide what matters and how they will contribute and serve others beyond their own self-interest. We still believe in education of the head, heart, and hands is the best way to develop our most precious natural resource, the students of Georgia, our young people. And we believe the character of Berry that attracted Teddy Roosevelt to Berry in 1910, that attracted Henry Ford to Berry in the 20s and 30s, that have attracted benefactors all through our years, is still what sets apart this kind of an institution. We're delighted you're here at Berry. We know that you too care a lot about our neighbors in the rural communities. Many of you are from rural communities, and it's in Berry's DNA. So we'd love to partner with you in making our whole state prosperous. I should point out that there are many other independent residential colleges located all over our state, in north, south, east, and west. They serve many of the small towns and communities. They aren't as large, and so they don't get the same recognition, perhaps, as our state-supported cousins, the universities, public universities. But these small colleges are scrappy, and they're enterprising. They are at the heart of their communities, and they're committed just like Berry. They're committed just like Berry to creating thriving communities in all over our state. So I commend them to you as well. Jenna Calvin, my colleague, where's Jenna? Is the executive director, president of the Georgia Independent Colleges Association, works with a lot of our legislatures, and she does a great job representing our sector to our representatives and leaders in the state. Welcome to Berry. If you have a chance to drive over at the end of the day, you'll discover a campus unlike any other that you've seen, ranked as one of the most beautiful. It is expansive and it's inspiring. And we love having you here. So thank you.
Thank you, President Briggs. We thank you. And Becky set us up yesterday, and we appreciate just hosting us here on this campus. And you'll understand more today that as legislators, we believe, as Martha Berry believed, that education is the key to the prosperity of rural Georgia. And we look forward to partnering with you on other occasions. And we just thank you for what you're doing for the state of Georgia and its students. Thank you so much. Before I turn it over to Meg, I'd like for the audience to know who we have here today that it's journeyed a long way to listen and to talk to the presenters. And I'd like to start with Ron Stevens. He's probably the furthest away right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ron Stevens. I represent Savannah, Chatham County, and the fastest growing county in the state, Bryan County, which is a blessing and a curse in itself. So.
I'm Matt Hatchett. I represent Lawrence and Johnson County. And Chairman Stevens, I thought I had the fastest growing city. You know, it's doubling every day. So, yeah.
Oh.
I'm Steve Tarvin from District 2, parts of Whitfield, Walker, and Catoosa counties.
I'm Bill Workheiser. I represent Tattnall, Evans, Jeff Davis, and Appling counties.
Very good. I'm Gerald Green. I represent 9 counties down in southwest Georgia, and just delighted to be here.
I'm Mac Jackson. I'm from Sandersville, and I represent 6 counties in District 128. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm Bill Yerda. I represent District 152, which is Worth County, Lee County, and a portion of Daugherty County.
John Corbett, District 174, Lowndes, Eccles, Clinch, Ware, Charlton, and Brantley counties.
My name is Penny Houston. I represent Berrien, Cook, and Tift County. I have been a representative for 26 years, and it's been a pleasure, and I will be retiring, but I'm still going to go to these rural development councils till I really retire in January.
I'm Darlene Taylor, District 173, and I represent Thomas and Grady County in southwest Georgia.
Rick Jaspers, House District 11, it's Pickens, Cherokee, and Forsyth.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Smith from Noonan, Georgia, and I represent House District 70, which is a large part of Coweta County, and Whitesburg part of Carroll County. And thank you for welcoming us today.
I'm Robert Dickey. I represent District 136, 5 counties in middle Georgia, and I live in a small unincorporated town where I farm. Proud to be a part of Georgia's largest industry, agriculture, and glad to be here this morning.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Hagan. I represent House District 156 in South Georgia, which is all or part of Tattnall, Toombs, Montgomery, Wheeler, Telfair, and Ben Hill counties.
Good morning. Katie Dempsey. I'm just humbled to have all of you here now that you've found your way. I hope you'll come back often. I represent House District 13, which is almost all of the city of Rome and most of the population of Floyd County. As you hear, many people have many counties, so I'm very fortunate to have this somewhat tighter district, but it's wonderful to have y'all here today.
We have 3 other people that we could not do without. Over there taking care of the technology is Justin, and Justin follows us all over the state. Stacy Williams is my admin, wherever. There's Stacy over there, so if you need something. And then we have Leo. Leo is the one that puts all of this stuff together and makes it work for us. So those are individuals that, really you should say thank you to on that. And I do say thank you. Okay. Chairman Mack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're getting ready to start our presentations, and we have Dr. David Bridges, who's the director of the Center for Georgia Rural Prosperity and Innovation Center. Dr. Bridges has been with us since 2017, I believe, and he's a friend to all Georgians, but he's especially a friend to rural Georgia. So it gives me great pleasure in introducing our first presenter, Dr. David Bridges.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
It's a pleasure to be here in Rome. Chairman Green, Chairman Jackson, appreciate the opportunity. To those of you members of the council, appreciate the opportunity for being here. You just heard from the president of Berry College, and I think you heard a message that of the past that might have equally or greater applicability to the future. If we could figure out how to grow our rural communities by pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps, I think it would be a phenomenal thing. We might should take a look at the life and effort of Martha Berry as we move forward. I'll let you do it. There we go. All right, so just take a few minutes, try to stay within the time limits, leave a few minutes for questions toward the end. Just briefly, I'll tell you what I'm going to tell you. Talk a little bit about a rural Georgia status check, some trends, prosperity measures, and then try to bring some suggestions for a path to the future. You know, back 8-9 years ago, and then in 2017, Speaker David Ralston made this statement that highlighted in yellow is the most important part of the statement. I believe it to be equally true today, that we still have communities that are struggling. And I thank Speaker Burns for his effort to keep the council going. And I think we need to reflect on the fact that we are one Georgia, we rise together, we fail together, and there's a lot that needs to be done in rural Georgia. Our center has been in existence for 6 years. We've worked hard. We're a very small team of people. I have with me today most of our team. Scott Blunt's here. Scott, raise your hand. Scott lives in Waycross, works out of there. Deborah Cantrell lives in McKaysville and works out of our LJ office. And I live back in Terrell County and work wherever my car takes me. We've worked very hard, and with a very modest budget, we've invested about $2.7 million over 6 years in rural Georgia, and those projects have resulted in a total investment of about over $400 million. That return on investment we think is pretty good. And we continue to do work. We focus our effort. We do not work exclusively, but we focus our work in the smallest counties in the state, the 53 counties that have a population of 15,000 people or fewer. That doesn't mean we don't work other places, but that's where we focus our effort. Some of the things we're working on right now is to try to increase the value and the importance and marketability of Georgia forest products. We are the #1 forestry state in the union, and the forest industry is severely stressed, severely stressed. So we're doing everything we can. In October, we will cut the ribbon on an exhibit called Forestry at the Fair. If you were there last year, we promoted the cotton industry. This year, we're working with the Georgia Forestry Commission, Georgia Forestry Association, and private sector to promote forest products. We'd welcome you to be there when we cut the ribbon on it on October the 3rd. We're also have been working for about 3.5 years on a concept and the development and hope to move toward the construction of a Forest Products Innovation or Mass Timber Education Center for the state of Georgia. And we're getting close. We just got a U.S. Forest Service grant to help advance that concept. We continue to work with small communities that have problems with infrastructure and do not have the people, the resources, or whatever to advance those. And we've worked every corner of the state over the past 6 years on those kinds of projects. And then we routinely do some work with others, partners, to do community planning in the areas of hospitality, agritourism, healthcare, and business. So what I wanted to say to you this morning is, and we're going to try to be as positive as we can, but and you saw this slide last year, the rope is severely strained in much of rural Georgia. Opportunities are slim, population continues to decline, revenue and cost are getting seriously out of imbalance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but rural Georgia is facing very difficult time. You can call this correlation, cause, effect, or whatever. I'm a statistician. You call it whatever you want. But the fact that the population of Georgia continues to concentrate in a very few areas around metro Atlanta, the coast, Ron is really doing well, but the population of the state continues to concentrate. And that's not good on either front. It's great for economic development for the state as a whole, that the more urban areas continue to grow, but it's not so good that the rural areas continue to shrink. People say, why is this happening? Why does it keep happening? There are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into them today. But I want to share with you one slide I did not create. But this, if any slide, will tell you that we have had a problem for a long time and we continue to have a problem, is this slide right here. In 1994, we had 13 counties in the state of Georgia that had more deaths than births. In 2022, we had 116. Now, if you can't be waked up if that doesn't wake you, okay? Because as population continues to decline, these communities face greater and greater and greater struggles. I'm an old farm boy and engineer type. How many of y'all know what PSI stands for? It ain't pounds per square inch today. It's prosperity sliding into insolvency. And I'm going to use that term insolvency very carefully. I've talked with a number of economists, business folks, bankers, etc. There's a difference between insolvency and bankruptcy. If you're a municipality or a county and you're committed and charged and required to provide certain services like education, public safety, EMS, roads, bridges, etc., and you don't have enough revenue to pay for those things, at some point you become insolvent. Insolvency is worse than bankruptcy. You can't escape it. There's no escaping. So this is my last sort of warning negative word today, and then I'm going to talk about some possible solutions. Agriculture is the #1 business in the state. Agriculture in this state may have never faced the challenge that it faces today. People talk about the 80s. I'm not sure when we reach the fall and the winter of 2025, we're going to forget about the 80s, folks. Commodity prices are at or below what they were in the late 70s, early 80s, and cost of production has increased by 5 or 6-fold. Two of my great lifelong friends, who are absolutely among the best farmers in the state of Georgia, told me this week during lunches that they will make a great crop this year, and none of them will pay out. They will all be in the hole. So agriculture's in trouble, forestry's in trouble. If I produce a map for you where those two industries support a county, you're going to see we've got trouble. That's all I'm going to say about it, but we have trouble. So for several years, we've been talking about prosperity. It's in the name of our center. What does prosperity mean? Most people think it means money. It means far more than money. I'm not going to read what's on this slide. But there are a lot of elements that you might consider that are indicators of prosperity. Some of them are up here. We decided several years ago that until in this state, we had a reliable way to define prosperity and to measure it, and measure it on a recurring basis so that we could be held accountable for progress or lack thereof in enhancing prosperity across rural Georgia. We had to have something to measure. And so we have created and are in the final stages of working on the Georgia Prosperity Index. We have a 16-parameter model that includes education, health care, attainment, access, personal finance, community finance, business climate. We've covered the waterfront. 16 parameters in the model. It is constructed in such a way that it can be run every year based on recurring, publicly available data. We're fine-tuning it right now, and this is all I'm going to say about it today. But we have detailed information on all 159 counties and have created this Prosperity Index. And it is our intention to use this index to help coach, county by county, strategic investment to try to lift the level of prosperity in these counties. So just for the purpose of today, I'm going to show you one slide, and all we did was we followed suit of some other things that occur. And that is we divided the state's 159 counties into quartiles. of prosperity. So the following map reflects these parameters and a measure of prosperity for each of Georgia's 159 counties. The darker the county, the greater the prosperity. The lighter the county, the less prosperity. And I don't have to tell you, we could pick 20 different parameters and put a map up, and you're going to still see this diagonal band across the central part of the state moving down to the southwest where prosperity is the lowest. And I believe this is accurate because I live in one of those white counties. Dave Wills is here today. He lives in one of them too. And we believe it is very accurate, and we're trying to finish it up, and we'll move ahead. Now, I was asked to bring some solutions. So I'm going to propose a solution. Worldwide, there are concepts related around hub cities. And we had some conversations with both House and Senate leadership over the summer about the possibility of implementing a hub city model in the state of Georgia. The idea is we can't fix everybody's problems at one time. But if we could identify a few communities, a relatively small number, as a pilot project, and help develop a fully integrated, comprehensive, forward-moving plan to increase prosperity that included health care, education, workforce, you name it, and concentrate investment on the part of the state over a period of 3 to 5 years in these communities. We believe that we could demonstrate that you can increase prosperity. We believe that as those communities, hub cities, grow, they will influence positively the spoke cities. That is, the communities that are within driving distance and reach of those hubs. And that ultimately, prosperity will spread if we do that. And so, what do I mean? Why? Why would we do this? Well, it means, we have to do an assessment of condition. You can only do so many at one time. We could, if you focused on a few hub cities, you could rapidly develop and deploy a multi-year plan. You could target your investment. You could have measurable, timely measurable returns on investment. You could capitalize on existing infrastructure. You can read the rest of the slides. We think this has great possibility. So how do you identify hub cities? What are the criteria? We pulled a group of people together and we talked about it. We think principal elements are you got to have transportation access. I'll let you read the sub numbers. Education across the board, from pre-kindergarten to post-secondary education. Health care. You got to have a hospital, folks. In a hub city, we can have a hospital in every town in the state of Georgia, but in a hub city, you got to have a hospital. And you got to have access to other health care, specialties, and we must have more OBGYN services in the state of Georgia. I've said this a dozen times, and it's rather blunt, but you can have a baby in 159 counties in the state of Georgia, but you don't want to have a baby in 159 counties in the state of Georgia. That's an issue that we have to deal with. We need a diverse business environment with opportunity for jobs across the board. And we need leadership. We need effective local, state, federal, school, business leadership in these communities. For hub cities to work, and this model has been deployed around the world. This is not some new idea of ours. This has been done around the world in various areas. We have to admit there's some urgency. And where there's some urgency, we need to act. We acknowledge the issues are very complex. If you look at the 16-parameter model and the data that's behind it, you will see that there are consistent failings in those communities that are suffering from a lack of prosperity. We've got to have an integrated strategic plan for investment. We can't just keep spreading the jelly so thin that nobody can taste it. And that's what we've been doing. We need a commitment over time You're not going to fix it in 1 year. I've showed you a slide that shows we've had problems since the 20s, literally. Rural Georgia has been in decline. We can't assure prosperity for everybody, but we can demonstrate the capability to produce prosperity in some places and hope to replicate best practices. And in some cases, I've said this before, you're going to have structural change. What I mean by that, counties are going to have to learn to work together. I understand it's political non-reality and non-starter to talk about county consolidation, but we can share services and do things across county lines that spread fixed cost across greater numbers of people and help us delay insolvency. So Gerald, told you I'd stay on my time limit. That's my time. I will be happy to entertain any questions that you may have about this or anything else.
Are there any questions from the committee for Dr. Bridges? Go ahead.
Sure, I do. David, when you're looking at this hub thing, I'm sure you're looking at dollars also. I mean, that's what you do very well. And I think each hub city would have a different need of dollars. Is that a part of the model that you're going to look at that's going to bring in what it would take if the state were to put money into it, or if the locals were to pull money together to make it effective?
Yeah, so the idea, to back up, the reason we wanted to develop the Prosperity Index was so that we had meaningful information across the board. Business, education, transportation, healthcare, all these things that are indicators of prosperity, so we could figure out what's lacking. The idea would be to work bottom up to assist the community in developing a comprehensive plan that would address everything from education to healthcare to infrastructure to the business climate to what have you, so that they become more attractive for inbound migration and work. And then say, okay, here are the elements of the work that must be done. What is it going to cost to do that? How much skin in the game can the community put? And that's why the hub cities cannot be at the very bottom of the pyramid. They have to be in a situation where they're currently achieving some degree of prosperity for us to lift them up. But it's to demonstrate the model. And then the notion would be to ask them to put skin in the game, to ask the state to invest money, to leverage federal money, private money, all focused toward a comprehensive, integrated advancement plan for that community.
Chairman Dickey.
Statement and a question. I just really thank you for pointing out some of these things, especially from an ag issue. I'm involved in ag and forestry, and I can promise you this group, we're teetering on disaster and really both. We're growing more timber and wood in this state than we're using, and we're about to a tipping point where it's going to be a huge glut of wood and timber, and we don't have the markets. And we're not exporting what we need to with a strong dollar, and our prices for timber could just plummet very easily, just like commodity prices have now. And when you lose, those two industries get unprofitable in our rural counties, and that's where they are, it is going to be an economic disaster. And I don't think people in leadership in this state realize what's coming if something doesn't change.
Well, you're right, and loggers are going out of business left and right because the hyperinflation we've experienced the past 3 or 4 years in fuel and everything else, equipment, et cetera, is driving them out of business. We've done 5 feasibility studies in the last 2 years for loggers, looking at federal programs that provide grant and loan money for logging operations to assist them. Those programs require an independent feasibility study to be done. It can't be done by the bank. It cannot be done by the applicant. And it cannot be done by the forest, a consulting forest. It must be done by an independent entity. And we've been doing those. We've been successful. We've gotten 2 loggers who have gotten substantial U.S. Forest Service grants, and we have a 3rd one that we expect to be awarded in the next few weeks. But you're right, Chairman. The forest and ag businesses are in dire straits, and we're spending money left and right. My wife really fussed at me day before yesterday, Tuesday, when she paid the Sumter EMC bill because my irrigation systems haven't been cut off in weeks. And she looked at it, she said, this cannot be right. We cannot owe this much money in a 130-day period. I said, unfortunately, we do. Just give me the bill. I'll pay it out of the farm account. I don't know where the money's coming from, but I'll pay it. But it's tough.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hatchett.
I wasn't going to say this, David, but I'm surprised that your wife only fusses at you every other day. So.
I didn't say she didn't fuss at me. She may have already fussed at me today. You know.
No, I think you're definitely on to something here, because this, as you know, how do we put our arms around the big issues? And I think you got to start somewhere, and starting to really focus on, quote, hub cities that could do better, but they're obviously have some buy-in and local buy-in that they are trying to do better, and things we may be able to help them with. And I think that is so important when you work on projects with different cities, different, you know, all entities in general, not even just cities. There's got to be the local buy-in and the support and the want to get better. And I just, it's kind of a statement, and I'm, you know, you said kind of a 5-year timeline. I think it's probably much longer than that to really be able to see change and be able to measure that you are helping. And then hopefully some of these other communities will say, hey, we want in too. So I mean, I think it's a great way to finally put our arms around something and actually make some differences for the better.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Bridges. We was at the Joint Ag Summit in Perry a couple days ago, and we had a professor from UGA talking about, he said, you know, tariffs, there'd be a bad for ag, but with that same thought in mind, the main issues our farmers have is with the rules and regulations coming out of Washington, federal regulations, Department of Labor, the wage and hours, the H-2A workers, the EPD, the Tier 4 engines, the things that used to be labeled, they're no longer labeled, which they can still use in these other countries. So we have an unlevel playing field. And with that unlevel playing field, in my opinion, that's basically putting a tariff on our American and Georgia-grown farmers. What's your opinion? How can we get Washington's attention and look, we need to level the playing field?
I ain't going there. I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes we have a difficult time getting our own neighbors to understand. I mean, the American public has become accustomed over decades and decades and decades to a plentiful and cheap food supply. That's what they expect. We're just, the inflationary cost associated with petroleum alone, past 4 or 5 years, 3 years, is just horrible. I mean, you look at transportation cost. I shipped a small pallet to Ames, Iowa 2 weeks ago for my son. Probably weighed 300 or 400 pounds. Small pallet of components that he had built. 300 or 400 pounds, less than truckload pricing, Old Dominion to Ames, Iowa. You know what the freight was? $920-something. Freight costs are everything. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I just bought a bunch of gravel working on a pond dam. Transportation costs for the stone from Columbus to Parrott, which is not far, people, 47 miles. The transportation cost was twice what the gravel cost. So the farmer eats that every turn of the, whether it's diesel, fertilizer, chemicals, whatever. I don't know. I can't convince my own neighbors that, they're getting ripped off at the grocery store and assume that Robert Dickey and I are getting rich.
Chairwoman Darlene Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, it's a great idea, and I do think the hub system would work. It worked with our medical 50 years ago in our community. They worked with surrounding counties, helped to manage the local hospitals in those counties, and it's worked wonderfully, and it kept those hospitals in rural areas together. So I think we're onto something very well. Where I see some issues are where we have counties with a population less than 3,000. How do they support themselves now? And even if you take 3 or 4 counties there, you're still going to have 10,000 people. And the property, a lot of it is in Cuba, it's forestry, or it's property for ag. I don't know how we're going to get through that weeds, I guess. That's the problem I'm seeing. They've got to work together, but they haven't got much to work with. How can we help them?
That's the insolvency issue. Yeah, there's not a revenue stream that will support, now I'm just going to say it like it is. You can't support a school system, a sheriff's department,
a court system,
EMS, utilities, roads, et cetera. The current cost of things, you can't do it. So they're going to have to learn how to figure out a way to work.
They lose the best and brightest. Those that have the abilities to stay and help build it, they leave. The young people don't stay. That's why they're not having population growth, because they can't get those second generation, third, now fourth generation to stay.
Yeah, well, you're facing the fourth shoe to fall. The first one was retail consolidation in the late 70s and 80s, when the big box stores concentrated retail and shut down retail enterprises in small communities. Those buildings are all being torn down now. People think it's to sell the bricks. No, it's so they won't have to pay property tax on the buildings because there's no demand for it. And then we had the Ross Perot Great Sucking Sound on the North American Free Trade Agreement that dried up small manufacturing and has subsequently devastated agriculture and other things. And so then you got commercial buildings as a result of that you got industrial parks all over rural Georgia that don't have any viable businesses in them. There's no demand for that stuff. And so people are getting tired of paying tax on that too, so they're beginning to take that out. So now the tax base in on many of these communities is focused entirely on residential. What did I just show you? They're depopulating to nothing. That's the last shoe to fall. When there's literally no demand for residential property in these communities, then your tax base is completely gone. And that's when you hit insolvency point. And that's coming. I mean, it's just, I got my new assessment on my property. I can't say, well, you can buy it because I don't want to sell it, but I guess I'm going to pay it. But,
Yeah.
I don't know where that appraisal came from, but.
Thank you. I do think it's a great idea, and it's something we need to move forward with and find the magic wand that will help some of these. You're right, though, it won't fix them all, but we can start somewhere. Thank you for this.
Chairman Tarver. Steve.
Most people know this. I'm a little slow. Are you trying to tell me that farmers are not price gouging? Is the reason the prices are...
They're not price gauging either.
These are things we've suspected and known, but when you see the birth-death ratios and see those counties in color that we've all suspected the light ones were doing what they were doing, it's quite eye-opening. Appreciate that.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of hidden things, and I'll be quiet, but the hidden things that people don't, there's the old story about, boiling a frog, you put him in cold water and raise the temperature. Well, here's a great example of where regulation has just hammered the farmer and the loggers and contractors. I have 5 tractors. I have 2 that are, one's 45 years old, 150 horsepower tractor. I have another one that's a early 90s model, John Deere, 240 horsepower. And I have two newer tractors. I have my little bitty tractor that was my dad's, but I have two newer tractors. One's 120 horse and the other one's 150. We've gone to Tier 4 engines. Okay. My largest tractor, my 8400 John Deere, which is an early 90s model, 240 horsepower. It does not burn as much fuel as my 100 horsepower Tier 4 Case IH. I mean, you can put a 6-foot rotary mower behind that 100 horsepower tractor, and if you run a farmer's day, meaning you get on it at 7 o'clock, you can put some fuel in it before dark. We're just wasting fuel with Tier 4 engines. Okay, I mean, you know that 6-row cotton picker that my friend owns that picks my cotton, that thing will burn 250 gallons of diesel a day. And that's a short day. If you had a long run day, got started picking at 10 and picked till midnight, you burn more than that. You have to put some more fuel in before the day's over. It's killing us. It's killing fuel. I got a friend that's in the logging business. He burns 10,000 gallons a week in his fellow bunchers, skidders, and trucks hauling wood to the mill. 10,000 gallons a week. It's killing everybody.
Charlene Smith.
Thank you very much for all the research you've done and the concept. I'm like everybody else, I agree with that. I have found, because last year this committee approved our effort to consolidate just the administrative aspects for our counties that are declining population and wealth. Our problem became the sales job, how to get the votes we needed in both the House and the Senate. And we had it almost across the line, and our colleagues on the Senate side on the last day found out how to load it up with some of their issues, and so we lost that battle. But along this path that we were on, I found that the Municipal Association and ACCG were good allies in messaging as well. And my experience has been, we all live and see these problems. I still think the urban voters think you get your meat in the grocery store. I mean, I think it's the buy-in we need from them is one of our biggest challenges. And we were able to do that last year, but the last day of session, the bill got shot down. So I like the idea of sharpshooters going around and trying to push an issue and see if we can get that passed and start educating our colleagues. They're not indifferent to these issues, but it's not something their constituents know or have bought into. So I guess that's my biggest concern, that as our population density increases, the willingness and knowledge of an individual voter to engage in this is declining. So I think one of the things we need to learn how to do is to be the top salesman for our area with our colleagues who care, but it's just not on their plate as a problem. But thank you, all the research you've done, and you've just done phenomenal work, and I thank you for that.
Chairwoman Penny House.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. You know, I come from a real rural county that has about 5,000 people in it. And I don't think folks realize too, so many of these small counties, when you're talking about 3,000 people in the county, don't realize that some of them have a state prison there. And
We do.
And that's part of the population. About 2,000 are county, and they don't take that into consideration. And neither do they take into consideration when you're talking about picking cotton, how much a cotton picker costs.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think one thing we did this year to help the farmer was the bill we passed about that if you jointly own a cotton picker, you can take the taxes off. But one thing too, I have, and Gerald knows this, I have pushed since I've been up here, we've got to consolidate. You cannot run a county with 2,000, 3,000.
I ain't touching that.
And Gerald and
I ain't got no green button or no red button.
Well, I tell you, I don't have any green button, but I've got a farm over there, and we haven't done reevaluation, and I'm shattered to think what's gonna happen.
Yes, ma'am.
But I wanna thank you for what you're doing. And one thing too, I was reading in the Atlanta paper, somebody was running for representative and said that the film industry was the largest industry in Georgia. I know y'all read that too. They don't have a clue of what's going on, half the folks.
That's right.
That's what Lynn said, we need to promote and
Well, maybe
educate people.
maybe they mean everybody watches Netflix.
Maybe they do. Thank you so
Bridges.
much, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. I think every county should have you to come and talk to them because you've done your research and you do a wealth of good things for our county. Thank you, and Scott, for everything you do.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is from the University of Georgia College of Engineering, Dr. David Gaddy, Associate Professor. Dr. Gaddy.
Thank you, Chairman Jackson, Chairman Green, and Vice Chair Corbett. I appreciate y'all having me in Rome. And Representative Dempsey, it's a pleasure to be here because the last time I was here was in 2013 when because it's also my wife's son, married a girl from Rome, Georgia, right here on this campus in that really pretty Ford rock building over there. So it's a pleasure to be back. I'm going to build a good bit off of what David just presented. The power sector, this is about electricity in Georgia. The picture's not as bleak, or the story's not as bleak right now, but some of the things that David just talked about as far as rural Georgia goes, we could really put the state in an even tougher position if we're not vigilant. So what I want to talk about is powering all of Georgia reliably and affordably. We are up against, and I'm sure most of you are aware and know what's coming as far as policy is concerned in the U.S., but we're facing increased electricity demand all over the country. We are in Georgia, but this is facing headwinds. The headwinds being there are policies that are oriented towards putting downward pressure on reliable power generation facilities, particularly coal and natural gas plants. So the concern here and the things that I want to touch on here in this presentation is what are some of the potential implications this is going to have on rural communities in Georgia. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to look at Georgia in general relative to the U.S. and other states. We're going to look at resource diversity, talk about Georgia models. Then we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into Georgia's cooperatives, talk about generation capacity, and I'm going to close out with what I think are just a few simple recommendations, simple to state, but they're just a little bit tougher, I think, that as far as implementation goes. But just as I go through this, keep in mind, we are moving towards an increasingly electrified economy. It's not talking about, in particular, just EVs. But it is just we are having increased demand, upward pressure on electricity, and that means we're going to have more power plants, more electricity capacity. So here's the U.S. This is what we've looked like since the end of World War II. Right now, keep in mind, and kind of thread through this as we go through it, that federal policy currently is focused on carbon reduction. That's what federal policy currently is focused on. And if we're talking about something like decarbonizing our economy, zeroing out fossil fuels and things like that, right now our power sector in the U.S. is 58.3% fossil fuels. One of the things to notice, what we've always done in this country, is we have valued diversity. When we discover an energy resource, we have always added that resource to our industrial base. Because with that resource comes technologies, supply chains, and industrial or economic growth. Notice the coal line here. As an academic, what I'm supposed to do is celebrate that downward trend in coal. And just let me make this real clear. Climate change is an issue, but this is not the point of this presentation. That coal line is a domestic, storable, baseload resource that has essentially powered this country for the past 75 years. Losing that resource, declining that resource and that technology is a security concern. It is a reliability concern, and it is a cost concern. We're also losing diversity in this. We love, in my group, natural gas. Natural gas has been a godsend to this country and to this state. But if you're an engineer, I happen to be one of the nerds in the room, if you're going to meet the demand of a just-in-time 24/7 electricity out here, and you're going to meet that with a flow resource like natural gas, that's tough. If there's a problem in the Gulf, you're going to have a problem at your power plants. That's why we value the diversity part here, and why we're a little concerned. In fact, we're deeply concerned about losing coal capacity in the country. We still have 2 plants here in the state of Georgia, Bowen and Shearer, and it's our push that we keep those coal plants in operation as long as we really possibly can. So I'm not going to celebrate the decline in coal. I'm going to say we've got some concerns that we need to take into account. Here's Georgia, and I'll go through this and I'll parse these out in our regulated versus deregulated markets, and I'll compare this with 7 other states. You know our market here in Georgia, vertically integrated, regulated market structure, generation, transmission, and distribution. The upside to that, as many upsides as there are, one of the key upsides is somebody's responsible for reliability there. One company, one group, they are responsible for reliability. That's a benefit for the state of Georgia. It gives us the advantage of being able to prioritize reliability, and we'll look at some states who aren't able to do that. So as I go through this in the other states, notice the trend lines. Here, coal has been down in Georgia. It's starting to flatten out. Gas is up. Nuclear has been flat until recently with Vogtle 3 and 4. We're sitting at about 46.9% natural gas. It's a pretty good mix right now. We're the only state in the country, the only state that is offsetting a reduction in coal with all 3, natural gas, nuclear, and renewables. We're the only state in the country doing that. And we're also keeping our rates low. Now, this sounds like it's a rosy picture for the state of Georgia. I'll get to the co-ops in specific detail in just a minute, but keep in mind what we're doing in Georgia is not necessarily what's coming out of D.C. D.C. again is putting downward pressure on all fossil fuel resources. These are going to be the 7 states, and I've got them in 3 tiers. The first one here, Florida, upper left, that's the only state of the top 8 GDPs in the U.S. It's the only other state besides Georgia that has a regulated, vertically integrated market. And you'll see it there in the upper left, the trend. Gas is up, coal is down, nuclear is flat. It's that way in Florida, it's that way in Ohio, and it's that way in Illinois. Gas is up, coal is down, nuclear is flat. The second tier, Pennsylvania and New York. Coal is down, gas is up, nuclear is down. When you shut down nuclear capacity, immediately what you do is you backfill with natural gas. So if you've got carbon objectives like they do in states like New York, and you shut down a nuclear reactor, something has to backfill it, and it's going to be what's available and what's economical, and in this case it was natural gas. And then you get to the poster children states, that's Texas and California. And if we ever have been given a glimpse into what happens when you structure your power generation sector around either just chase what's cheapest for the next 2 or 3 years, you get Texas. And if you chase zero carbon, you get California. But what you get in both cases is reliability goes to heck. In California, Gas is up, kind of. Coal is out. Nuclear's flat, and they just saved their last nuclear plant through government action. They were trying to shut it down too. Renewables are up. They've got low carbon. But their rates, those residential rates in California are 28.92 cents a kilowatt hour. Here in Georgia, they're about 14. Texas, natural gas is up, coal is down, and they're backfilling with wind and solar. And we know what the consequences of that are. We've seen it happen, and it rolls out every year. So this brings to us, again, this is the concern. This is all going to come back to rural Georgia, because rural Georgia, to David's points, they are vulnerable. Those communities are vulnerable when the cities make the decisions. If the cities make the decisions, the rural communities pretty much deal with the consequences of that. Here's just a daily, midnight to midnight, how you follow peak demand or how you follow a demand daily. And here's the bottom line on this. We have done this in the U.S. and in Georgia. We've done it well for decades and decades and decades. And this is how you do it. You have to have baseload resources. In this case, nuclear and coal have always served as that. Increasingly, natural gas combined cycles are becoming baseload plants because we got a lot of gas. But once you get above that, you have to have something that's going to follow that load and that demand quickly. When solar kicks in, we're going to use that gas and kind of throttle it down a little bit. But once you get up to the peak, we need peaker plants. We need every resource that is on that screen. We are not going to be able to keep the grid reliable and affordable if we simply say we need to structure this entirely around whatever's cheapest or whatever's lowest carbon. There are some trade-offs here. That's why in the state of Georgia, what's been done so well over the years is we prioritize reliability as affordably as we can while trying to reduce carbon. But it's always been about reliability. That has benefited the state, both urban and rural. And if we look around the state, no need to busy yourself with looking at this graph. There's only two things that I want you to note about this. The color columns, they're consistent. Let's see. I don't know what color that is right here. What are the natural gas, yellowish brown, coal is gray, nuclear is blue. Notice how that changes as we go around. We'll do it in a second. But look in the upper left, the residential rates, 2023, U.S. average, 15.98 cents. Start in the east-south central, dead bottom, a little to the left. A lot of natural gas, a lot of nuclear, a lot of coal. That's the conventional energy resources that have built the country. Natural gas, nuclear, and coal. The rates are pretty good, about a little over 13 cents. As we move into our section in the South Atlantic, still natural gas, nuclear, and coal, the rates are holding steady. Once you get up into that upper Northeast, Middle Atlantic, the New England states, coal is gone. And look at those rates. In the Middle Atlantic, 19.61 cents. In New England, 28.72 cents. Also deregulated markets up there. They haven't really done much of anything right. And it's not to say that once you get rid of coal, your rates are going to go up. Those are policy decisions. Those represent state cultures and what they want their state economies to be. It's not what we do down here in Georgia. Once you get back up into the east, north, central, coal's kicking back in. Then in the west, north, central, coal and wind dominate, but it's because that's where the resource is. And the rates are beginning to come back down. But once you get back out in that Pacific contiguous on the west coast, California comes back into play. Again, coal is gone. Natural gas and hydro are your leading. And that's because they've got deep ravines out there, lots of rivers, and a lot of hydro in Washington and Oregon. If we want to compare this, and here was the promise back in the 90s. The promise was if we just take these vertically integrated markets and we just break them up and we let the Wild West economy chase the cheapest rates possible. Let's just let them fight it out. We were going to get lower rates. That was the promise. Here are the states in the U.S. regulated retail rates since 2001. You see the red dotted line there, that's the U.S. average. And Georgia's the black dotted line. We're consistently below the U.S. average. And also notice those lines up there. They're tight. And they're mostly below the U.S. average, but they're tight. Straight over to the deregulated market, the red dotted line is still the U.S. average. Volatile and above average rates. Those markets have not returned what they promised, nor are they more reliable. Now again, we get back to the point of this committee. We don't, I'm going to recommend, subject our rural communities to this sort of volatility. It's just not what I think we should be doing. So we look at it relative to those 8 GDPs. This is Georgia, again, just to those 8 GDPs. And we simply are better at keeping those rates below average. And if we want to talk about CO2 emissions, if we want to see what Georgia has done CO2 emissions-wise, we will normalize it. And here it is, normalized to GDP, to our state GDP, CO2 emissions per economic output. You can see New York and California have us beat, but they've also plateaued out. There's only so much CO2 you can squeeze out of an economy before you can't get any more out of the economy. But if you look at Georgia here, and again, Georgia's the red dotted line, U.S. is black, red and black. There's a theme there. The red dotted line is Georgia, and this tie is not completely red. The black dotted line is the U.S. We in Georgia have done a great job. Rates are down, reliability is steady, and we're doing great at CO2 emissions. But again, the concern is we're okay now. We're doing a good job now, but the pressures are coming to do more, and it's going to be mostly focused on this chart right here at CO2 emissions. So, to the Georgia co-ops, this is in the U.S., and these customer counts are meters, not people. I mean, it's a household. So in the U.S., cooperatives, we've got about 17,690,000 residential meters in the U.S. In Georgia, 1,938,000 plus. We are the second largest co-op residentially in the country. Commercially, second largest co-op in the country. Industrially, we're the fourth largest. And I have spoken in probably 20 to 25 states at their state EMC section meetings, and they envy Georgia. I don't even have to go out there and brag on us. They envy not just our rates, not just our reliability. They envy the state's relationship as far as its power sector in general, IOUs, co-ops, the MEAGs, and how well we get along in this state, where when it comes to providing electricity, it is Team Georgia. They compete for loads, but when it comes to 20 and 30-year outlays, it is about Georgia. It's about the citizens of Georgia, and it's about this economy. So what I've done, and I do, this one graph in particular, I think really relates back to what David just presented when the thing about the deaths and births, I almost threw up in the back row. That really was depressing to me. What I've done with our state co-ops, these are residential, these are co-ops in the residential rates. The red dotted line is what I showed you earlier. That's just the U.S. average. But what I did was I took the co-ops who 1 million megawatt hours plus. Those are the ones with a little bit more urban area to them. But then the ones that are below that, the ones that tend to be more rural in those white counties that David had. And then the gray line is just the average for all residential co-ops. And you can see the rates for those that are below the 1 million megawatt hours, that little brown line, a little bit higher. That's just an economy of scale issue there. The blue line, which are the more densely populated areas, those rates tend to be a little bit lower. If we look at residential rates, this is Georgia compared with every other state. And I didn't worry about, I know the lines are busy, but those are 50 states up there. But Georgia's that red dotted line. That's how we compare residential rates for our rural cooperative residential customers in the state of Georgia with every other co-op residential in the rest of the country. We are far below the average, and we're doing a really good job at serving those communities currently. If we compare this with those top 8 GDPs, we're just better. But it's easy to say Georgia's better. A couple of more, this is not as busy a figure as it may seem, but I've got in green, Georgia, in brown are those top 8 GDP states, and all I wanted to point out here are 2 things. The first one is the yellow column, and it's rates, all 50 states. In Georgia, our average rates are lower than 65.6% of residential customers in the rest of the country. Again, lower than 2/3 of other co-ops. Our co-ops are outcompeting other co-ops. And then if we look at how much they pay per month annually, or not per month annually, that made no sense. How much they're paying annually, residential and consumption, we are lower than 56.6% of the rest of the country, co-op to co-op. So our generation capacity currently, we're sitting here, combustion turbines, and I won't be busy too much about each one of the columns, but we're very heavily dependent on gas. We've got nuclear, but my 2 boxes up here, these are where the concerns start to kick in. We've got upward pressure on capacity, new industry coming in, and it's great. EVs, 2 or 3 years ago, everybody was worried to death that EVs were going to, and you know what we did? We're calculatingly bringing those in. But the 2 that are on the burner right now are data centers and AI. We do not have any data for how to do this. So lots of things floating around as to how we need to respond, but they are going to matter. They're going to land somewhere. These data centers and this AI that goes with it, it is a national security issue. We can't outsource them, put them in Slovenia or Kazakhstan. They got to go statewide, and they got to land in somebody's state. And they are energy intensive, and as time goes on and they become more computationally intense, they use more electricity. This is just something we're facing, and we've got to face it. But at the same time, downward pressure, federal mandates on what has gotten us to where we are, fossil fuel plants, and pushing us towards more renewables. So at least for the time being, we've got new capacity, combustion turbines, we've got natural gas combined cycle. This is Georgia Power. Oglethorpe Power are coming in with about 1,640 megawatts of new combustion turbines. Both of them come in about 1,430 megawatts of combined cycle. And I know Georgia Power down here's got a PPA with Mississippi Power for about 750 megawatts of firm power with another 1,000 megawatts of battery storage. Just keep in mind with battery storage, it's not a new resource. That it's got to get its energy from those columns on the left. This is just technology that's going to store it. This is probably one of our strongest suits here, is that if we're going to be building scaled up power plant capacity, again, it's Team Georgia. It's Georgia Power, Oglethorpe Power, the MEAGs, the Daltons, and so forth. And you can see here that we've got a really good relationship when it comes to joint ownership of large facilities like this. Oglethorpe Power, this is just pretty much what they're in, and this is again what most of the EMCs are getting a good percentage of their electricity from is through Oglethorpe Power, and you can see there. But again, it's a good mix of nuclear, coal, and gas. So here's the carbon question, and I'm about to bring this thing in. This is what Georgia has done on CO2 emissions. This is in 2022 for our electric power sector. Right now, or at least in 2022, it was 33% of the state's CO2 emissions, 0.8% of the country's CO2 emissions, and 0.1% of global. Now keep in mind, climate change is a global issue. It's not a local only, it's a global issue. Currently, we are at 1977 levels. But the scream is do more, do better, do it faster, do it cheaper, and really just give us some free electricity that doesn't generate any emissions. We have done a great job in this state, but again, the concern is upward pressure on demand, downward pressure on what has been working. That's going to be a conflict. And if we look at global emissions since 2000, which is when China joined the World Trade Organization, 13,700 plus million metric tons for that period of time, and we know where it's come from. This is not a complaint about China. I've got other things to complain about China over besides CO2 emissions. But those China, India, the Asia Pacific, they are not going to stop burning fossil fuels. They're not going to stop building coal plants. They're not going to stop. The only countries putting downward pressure on CO2 are us and Europe. And again, the question on the table is, we need to do more. The state of Georgia needs to do more. So let's just take, and this is my last slide, at blue line on the bottom, U.S. emissions since 1990. The black line is global emissions since 1990. And the blue dotted line is, I'm going to just take the U.S. off the map completely, zero out all carbon, and you get the blue dotted line. Now, if climate change was an issue, and that sets us back to 2010 levels. So if climate change was an issue in 2010 with us, it's a problem in 2023 without us. The problem here is in 2023, we don't have fossil fuels standing up our grid, and we don't know how to do that. It's an experiment that we really don't want to conduct. So my summary points and recommendations: be cautious of any proposals or policies to transition this state away from fossil fuels and organize our economy around decarbonization goals. We cannot address this, climate change that is, on the back of our economy, and we don't need to do it on the back of rural Georgia. Many of our co-ops serve what are described federally as serving areas of persistent poverty, disadvantaged communities. And putting downward pressure on those reliable plants is going to put upward pressure on prices, because coal is just the first shot. Natural gas plants are next. EPA just only did the coal plants first. Natural gas plants are the next target. We need to continue leveraging our core advantages: vertical integration, long-term integrated resource planning, and joint ownership in power plants. Last two things, we do need to start looking at small modular reactors. They're still a ways out. They're not at the door, but we do need to start looking at those, and we need to plan for additional natural gas capacity. These are realities for the state. And I'll contend that with bad policy, our rural communities will suffer the consequences probably more acutely. I was supposed to have a slide up here that had one of the little rascals asking a question, but I think David jacked it. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Chairman Green. Chairman Green.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. And I want to tell the committee members that Justin's going to put this on our website, and that we will also have Leo will get this information out to you. Very great job in doing the presentation there.
Thank you.
Once again, you've pulled out the ideas of what's affecting rural Georgia, and we are very fortunate to have the EMCs and the individual MEAG and all of those groups to provide us with the resources that we have in the state of Georgia. That's what makes us the #1 state to do business in.
And we want to stay there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes.
I think there are other questions.
Thank you,
We
Chairman.
do have some questions. Chairman Bill, you ought to. Leon. Bill first.
Who?
David, appreciate your presentation.
Yes, sir.
You hit the nail on the head. I think diversity is the main thing. We've done a great job in Georgia with that. And I remember, maybe 10 years back, with efficiencies and things like that, we thought we'd have plenty of power, but boy, how that's changed. I'm just proud to be in Georgia where, we've got, like you mentioned, Georgia Power, Oglethorpe, the EMCs, and MEAG and the city of Dalton work well together. And, an example of that's completing the project of Unit 3 and 4 at Vogel. And that's a big deal for Georgia. We need to be proud of that, and we are proud that that's a great accomplishment for Georgia. I think that makes us the envy of the nation that we completed that project, the first new nuclear in over 30 years. And South Carolina started about the same time we did.
Yes.
They pulled the plug on theirs, and we got ours completed. So I think that puts us in a good position for economic development, continuing to be the best state to do business in. And one question I have is, you mentioned small nuclear, and of course I'd like to see more large nuclear. I know it's expensive and a challenge, and the first in Georgia was certainly a challenge, but with those, natural gas is kind of the answer right now, it seems to be. Talk about natural gas pipeline capacity in Georgia. Is that an issue with all the natural gas we're going to need to put online?
It will be an issue. I don't have any inside baseball data on where we are and what we're planning on doing, but we're going to need more transmission capacity out of the Gulf, maybe up out of the Northeast as well, but we're going to need more natural gas capacity. What we don't want to do is run into the situation like they've got up in the Northeast where they are choked every winter. And they deal with a lot of gas heating up there that we don't have as much of here. But what they end up with up there, because of their transmission choke points, they end up having to decide, are they going to use natural gas to generate electricity when it's really, really cold, or warm people's homes? And so the gas companies arbitrage that, and they take the highest bid. And those are downsides of that kind of market structure, and also simply elevating decarbonization as an objective, because a lot of those states up there just want to eventually get rid of natural gas as well.
Right.
So the capacity transmission, to your point, that's one of those forward-thinking things that we need to really be looking at, and the public needs to understand this as well. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Chair Lynn Smith.
Presentation, and I hope you're not grading us on our comprehension of all of this. So, thank you very much. I have some questions related to innovation. I know carbon capture sequestration has been studied in Mississippi and places like that, and that might be a tool in the future for our coal. And then the other things are the portable nuclear units that is out there on the discussion, and as well shingle panels, solar that might be helpful to our rural areas where they capture that. How realistic are those things I'm finding out about?
Yes, ma'am. The solar shingle panels, I'm assuming, is for them to generate their own electricity.
Exactly.
Mostly.
Especially for rural areas.
Yes, ma'am. So I think if we compare that with just regular rooftop solar now, I think that one's going to be a little more a little costlier than because the solar shingles just have not really matured yet. They're pretty expensive as well. So I think if they were really looking at being self-generating, I think and they wanted to do rooftop, I think they would need to go with the conventional rooftop solar for the time being. On the carbon capture, so there's 2 points that I try to make clear. If carbon reduction is the priority, if that's it and we have to do this, then we're going to have carbon capture. We're going to have it. If we're going to keep reliable plants, we're going to also have to tell our ratepayers they're going to have to pay more for this.
Yeah.
So my point in saying this is if we do prioritize carbon, and I'm actually saying we shouldn't,
Should, you agree
I'm
with
saying
me?
we should not.
Should not,
No,
okay.
we should not, because we get no return on that investment.
Okay,
Climate is global. We can zero the entire U.S. out, but imagine zeroing out Sly County or Jones County. There is no global climate, and climate's not going to stop at U.S. borders just because we got a good climate policy. It's not going to do that. So I'm not for imposing carbon constraints that then are going to require us, if we're going to keep maintaining reliability, we're going to have CCS. We're just going to have to tell the folks, you're going to have to pay for it. So that, and as far as the mobile reactors, Representative Smith, those micro reactors that you're speaking of, a little different category, but a great category than the small modulars I was talking about. The micro reactors are about 20 megawatts and smaller. And right now they see their application in the military for the most part, in forward deployment in remote locations, so that our military does not have that oil and gas supply chain that is oftentimes a problem. They can move forward with, they haven't scaled it up yet. It's not really advanced to that stage. But I think the SMRs, the small modulars, are probably going to be our first accessible economic scale reactor technology for states like Georgia. I think that'll be our go-to nuclear. If it's not going to be the big stuff, it's going to be the small one. And those are about 300 megawatts smaller.
thank you. I feel like it's good that we always look way ahead of ourselves and see not what we're doing now and making it better, but what we can do in the future that we've not even thought about. So the research is so important that's going on. And I heard a presentation one time from U.S. Army commander, and he talked, his job was to rotate batteries all up and down our interstates to keep all of our bases fully, they had to be ready for anything that would come.
Yes, ma'am.
So what we have now is, I guess I'm getting at, what we have now is not going to sustain us in the future unless we become creative. Am I correct with that?
As far, you mean sustain our power grid?
Right.
What we've got now is working. We are absolutely going to need nuclear in the future if we keep shutting down coal plants. We're going to have it. We're also going to have to pay for that. This is not going to be go from a conventional, proven, reliable, and affordable resource to a new one. There are going to be costs incurred there. So to the point you were making about moving forward, greater demand on electricity, we are going to need advanced technology. Batteries are one for now, but we're going to need those nuclear reactors to kick in, and we're always going to need natural gas. If anybody says natural gas is going to be a bridge to some future without natural gas, it's a bridge to nowhere, because we're not going to end well if we try to get off of natural gas in this country. And the straight up of it is the greatest cheerleader for us to decarbonize our economy is China. They would love for us to give that one a shot.
Well, we sell our old equipment to them, so, why not back at
Well, they
it?
own the supply chain on renewables and stuff, so they would love for us to
Right.
need them.
Right. Thank you very
Yes, ma'am.
much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Chairman Ron Stevens.
Thank you, David.
Yes, sir.
Kind of, would you comment, I guess, a two-part question following up on the chairman's here. Everything that I've seen and where we are today is good. But in the very near future, Georgia is going to be the 5th most populated state in the country. California will move to number 2. Texas will be number 1. Then Florida, 3, New York, and then Georgia. I see a train wreck coming, number 1. And how did the Fed square zero carbon throughout the United States, just us and Europe, whenever we're shipping coal out, and it's the same air, I thought.
It's the same climate, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer the first one, it will be a train wreck if we are not planning, particularly our grid out for 30 years. It'll be a train wreck. And I'm not trying to over belabor the point about our market structure, but deregulated markets cannot accommodate. That's why California is losing people. They are not able to look forward 10, 15, and 20 years. They only are looking at near term, 2 to 3 years out. What we've always been good at, for the most part in the country, is to the point you're exactly making, we've always thought about grandchildren for the most part when we did stuff. And we've lost a lot of that. That train wreck, for us to avoid it, is going to require us as a state to decide whether or not we're going to maintain our culture, our energy culture, our power sector culture, or not. If we maintain it, then we build out for 30 years. But we have got to broker that conversation with the general public because they don't understand it right now, I don't think, too. I think they're getting extreme narratives from two sides. It's confusing. My students are stuck in that same boat when they come into my classes. And it's hard for them to calculate just exactly what we should and shouldn't do. So for us to avoid the train wreck, we need good conversations with the general public to get them on board the train that ain't going to wreck. That sounded like, I don't even know if that was an answer to your question. But the train wreck is going to come, particularly if the federal policies are mandated from the top down to decarbonize, and that gets to your second point. There is no precedent for any industrialized economy to remain industrialized without fossil fuels. There is no precedent for an economy industrializing without fossil fuels. And my point is, if we want to be and maintain competitive advantage, Georgia against other states, the U.S. against China, they are not going to do this. So whose industrial base is going to be the winner? The one with all the energy resources and technology, or the one that's got a few and is just trying to be low carbon? That one wins over there. I got a little off dramatic, and I didn't mean to, but the train wreck you're talking about is the concern. It is the concern. And it's not going to be answered just by simply saying, do this. This is a conversation that really needs to be had. And as far as the federal government, if you can tell me why they do anything right now, I'll write it down and teach it.
Chairman Hatch is recognized next. And could you keep the questions down to one apiece, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, this has been a great presentation. You're right, the public needs to see it and learn it. Have you made a similar presentation to our Georgia congressmen and women?
I have made it to a few of them.
But not all of them collectively.
But I have testified at Congress three times.
Okay.
Congressman Carter knows me well. He's been in all three of those. But the short answer is no, sir. I have not spoken to all of them. And I think, to your point, they need to be in the room.
This is one more question. I think I've read recently where one of our power providers has applied to build more coal plants. Is that true?
In the state of Georgia?
Yes.
I have not heard that.
Okay.
I've seen
something where they've applied for more.
We're trying to hold on to what we got as far as over at Plant Shearer, and I think Oglethorpe Power's done that, is not retiring those units at Plant Shearer coal plants. And then up at Bowen, I think there was a proposal a few years ago to start retiring those, and I think the brakes were put on that because maybe we shouldn't. But not to build new coal plants. No, sir.
Chairman Joan Carberry.
Thank you, Dr. Gotti, for the presentation, and I just want to say you're a refreshing change to most college professors that we get to listen to. And I'm not going to elaborate on that, but absolutely refreshing change. But back to, I know Germany uses a lot of wood pellets. We make a lot of them in one of my counties and ship, all of them go to Germany, generate power. What's the possibility? I mean, we've heard the previous speaker talking about how forestry, we got to have new markets to help that industry survive.
The pellet, wood pellet
The wood
industry?
pellet to help
Yeah.
one generation, I know.
Economically, I say we keep cranking them out. If they're fool enough to pay for it and burn it over there, let them do it. But it kind of reflects Germany's mindset on energy.
Yeah, they shut
They're
down.
literally burning trees from Georgia because they've shut down their nuclear plants.
That's right.
You know, this is not one of these just shut one down, sort one up kinds of things. These are not fungible commodities that we're talking about. But I think we just keep selling to them. It's just great for our state. Agreed or not?
No, I agree.
Yeah, keep selling it. I don't know why they're doing it.
We'd like to increase that market more to help.
But one of the reasons.
Why don't we do it here? It would be the question.
Why don't we burn wood pellets here? Energy density, the heat and value of wood pellets, and plus once the transportation once you are shipping it too far. I think we tried that down in Albany, didn't we? Or maybe it was ethanol or something.
It was proposed.
What was it?
It was proposed at one time.
It was proposed. It's just we can get a lot more energy out of like coal and gas currently. I think there still is a lot of industrial application though for what you're talking about as far as on-site generation. I think a lot of plants in this state are doing that. And we certainly don't need to be wasting it. I mean, we need to be using it.
Right.
But if we can get money for it, all the better.
Chairman Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this presentation. It's Chairman Hatcher, you're right. A lot of people need to see this. I want to focus back on rural Georgia. Large-scale solar is expanding. Electricity providers are going that route and putting a lot of that solar and most all of it in rural Georgia. And I'm a little concerned about going on competing with our agricultural sector. Could you comment on whether large-scale solar in rural Georgia is a good investment? Should we be encouraging that or looking skeptical on that?
You could not have asked me a more uncomfortable question. So, in every other state but Georgia that I've talked about this, that question comes up, and here's their dilemma. Farmers in those states can make a lot more money by letting somebody come in, and they don't even have to clock in anymore. That still is depressing. That is not at all necessarily getting to David's point about, is it good for the community? Is it helping the community grow? So I don't know if the answer is a direct answer, or if it's really what we need to do is look at what are the broader implications of when that happens. There may be that one family benefits greatly from it, but taking productive farmland out of production, there is a roof to that. There's a ceiling to that. In this country, we clearly can't do that, but to a certain point. I don't know that we know what that ceiling is. It may be a lot lower than what we think. So my heart is with yours on this is something that hurts, and we don't know what the implications may be. But the hard time that I have is telling a farmer, don't do something that's going to help your family. And I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer. I wish I did.
Thank you.
That wasn't much of an answer.
No, it is. It's something on a lot of our minds going forward.
It's on the minds of everybody in every state I've been in, and all of these co-ops are all dealing with the same thing. And they start talking about the price out in Kansas or Missouri or Iowa, the price of wheat, the price of corn, the price of soybean, the price of solar, and my head is spinning. They come out and say, they're going to make X number and not even have to get on that Farmer's Day tractor. They just don't have to do it. So
it's a real jackpot for those that do it, have the opportunity to do it, but it's long-term, I think, implications on that.
I think there are too, and I don't think we've evaluated it nearly as well as we need to.
Chairman Jasper.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one of these subject matters that's pretty easy to ask a dumb question. And yeah, it is. I can see your students now, but you said a number of times what we have is working.
Okay.
And all the different combinations. I guess this last legislative session, we had some real serious questions about data centers, AI centers. And, you know, when you look at those and you look at what you've got there, without increasing capacity in megawatts, I mean real megawatts, it seems like those are going to collide in your graphs for Georgians, and that we're all going to pay more in power because of the limited resource. And am I looking at that right?
You're
or
looking
wrong?
at it, I think you're dead center, right?
Yeah.
So, to the point of it's currently working, it is. It's currently working in terms of it's reliable, the rates are lower, and we've got a forward-looking plan. So in that sense, it's working. And the concern, to your point, was we've got to start looking out for it, or it ain't going to work anymore. So, to answer your question directly, we're going to have to deal with these data centers as a standalone. It's not like every household is putting in a new air conditioner. Back in the 70s, we build new capacity and everybody benefits from it. That's not going to happen with these data centers. We're going to put in new capacity for that data center. How do we socialize those costs? How do we actually use that to put downward pressure on I'm not saying we can, I'm just saying we need to take advantage of the opportunity and try and put downward pressure if we charge them a different rate, a higher rate, a data center rate, or whatever the rate is. But we clearly cannot just have them come in, employ 5 people, build new assets, and socialize those costs on the backs of residential rate consumers. We can't do that.
That's what my concern was. I think a lot of our concern was that this year.
And I think in general, in every other state I've been in, everybody knows that we can't do that. I think the question is, again, so we've got residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation rates. Do we now have a 5th column that's a data center rate?
Yeah.
And that would be my push. And this is going to require us being y'all, because y'all are the ones that are going to be dealing with the data centers coming in and negotiating or talking about what are we going to do. It's going to take a different level of diplomacy than we've had in the past.
I heard whispering in my ear, we just created another lobbyist employment situation.
Thank you, Dr. Getty.
Thank you. Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Chairman Green.
Yes, before we proceed to the next presentation, we need Chief Casey to step up and make an announcement. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got our next presenter. Everyone knows him. He's a friend to our communities all over the state of Georgia. He's the Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, none other than Commissioner Christopher Nunn.
Thank you, Chairman. It's great to be with you.
Mr. Commissioner, if you would introduce your staff as well.
I will. I was going to say that we do that every time when we're meeting too. We just get going. So I'm Christopher Nunn. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs, and on behalf of DCA and the One Georgia Authority, I just want to thank you for not only the invitation to be here today, but also the broad support that we have enjoyed from each of you in the legislature. Yeah, that's not just in the form of appropriations and support under the Gold Dome, but also the calls I get from so many of you from the interaction and engagement that we have in your community and on behalf of the communities that you represent. So thank you so much for your continued support. Because you're standing in front of me, Penny. Also, a lot of people have taken a bio break, so we're going to have a little conversation. Before I dive into the presentation, I also want to thank my team, several of whom are here with me today. I think y'all know Rusty Haygood, my deputy commissioner, Jenna Webb, who is the director of the One Georgia Authority, Ryan Evans is our head of external affairs and government relations. And I'm also delighted to have one of our board members, Al Hodge, who many of you know, who is here with us today. I am honored to work with this team and certainly appreciate the great work that they do. I also want to thank Leo for helping us to get organized today. So I was asked to come and talk to you about two topics, rural workforce housing and infrastructure. Now, I'm going to focus primarily on rural housing, and then I'm going to touch on infrastructure. And my good friend and colleague Hunter Hill, who is presenting after me on behalf of the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, will I think, pick up on the topic of infrastructure, particularly as we look to address water and sewer issues throughout the state. And he can speak a little bit more to the money that was included in the budget last year that has helped us to continue to address many of those needs. You know, when we think about housing, this is a complex topic. And even more so when you think about all of the growth that is occurring around the state. Now, some of you may have seen the governor's announcement this morning as he highlighted the fact that we continue to grow and to add jobs and to experience economic success across the state. In fact, there were 427 economic development announcements, and those include expansions as well as new investments into our state just last year. 83% of those, representing about 18,500 new jobs, were in areas outside of the 10-county metro Atlanta region. So you can imagine that this topic of rural housing and workforce housing is increasingly complex when you overlay that, that issue. For the sake of time, I'm going to try to simplify this. So we tend to think about housing, if you were like me, through the lens of our own experience. And that's understandable, probably even human nature. But in fact, housing types and housing needs vary even within a community. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Even when you think about single-family, owned housing, which is the most plentiful housing option anywhere in the state, but certainly in rural parts, there are various types that make up those solutions. There's the new housing that we see across the state, but there's also the older, more established single-family homes. In so many of our rural communities, you've got historic homes that make up not only some of the charm, but also kind of the core in your downtown infrastructure. In fact, some of our rural communities have actually started to adapt their historic properties in their downtowns to address housing needs. And then, of course, when you think about the fact that about 2/3 of our population owns a home, there's another need for the third who rent. So our communities are made up of lots of different housing types and housing needs. Let's start with home ownership. So home ownership is an ideal. For families, it represents housing stability. It represents the opportunity to build wealth. But for communities, it also represents an increased rate of civic participation, neighborhood and school stability. I mentioned that about 2/3 of Georgians own the home that they live in. The actual rate varies by county from about 30% on the low end to close to 85% on the higher end. So, knowing that every community is different, let's assume that somewhere in that 60 to 70% range, which represents the state average, is a healthy home ownership rate. Well, since 1978, the Georgia Dream program has helped first-time home buyers to achieve home ownership. And that also helps to build stronger communities. This program works through an expansive network, statewide lenders all across the state. And over the past 45 years, Georgia Dream has enabled 51,000 Georgia households to achieve home ownership. For example, this young man on the left who is a college grad, completed his computer science degree, and he now works in IT for Verizon. He found himself, paying north of $1,400 a month in rent, and he said, you know what, it's probably a good time to buy a home. Well, he's one of about 1,500 households every year that participates in the Georgia Dream program. Again, over the last 50 years, 51,000 households in every single county in the state of Georgia have taken advantage of Georgia Dream. Now, you might imagine over that period of time, we do have to adapt to market conditions. Yet recently recognizing both opportunity to seize a relationship with the VA and also the fact that in many of our communities that are in close proximity to military installations, you have lower rates of home ownership. We launched a new program that is designed to help military families and households. It's called the Peach Select program, and that has already taken root, and it's doing really well, and it's helping us to drive home ownership in our communities. The Peach Select program. But over here on the right, I want you to just pay attention to this, and this is a graphic of the average mortgage in our program, not across the state, but of the loans that we originate. And you'll see that over the last 20 years, with the exception of a 2-year blip, there's a general trend of increase. But if you'll notice, in the 5 years between 2019 and today, that average mortgage has gone from roughly $130,000 in 2019 to a projected $260,000 in next year. Remember that. For sake of time, I'm going to skip a couple of slides here, although I'm going to just reiterate the point. Housing is more expensive today. Here on the left, if you look at this this home, this is around the corner from the house that I grew up in Perry. In fact, this house and 12 others like it were purchased in 1925 from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Okay? They cost $2,000, and they were constructed to provide housing for the managers of the local cement plant. Now, adjusted for inflation, that represents about $36,000 in construction costs today, and I dare say you couldn't build this for $200,000 today. So the first thing I want to talk about is it's important to preserve what we've got. To do this, DCA uses some federal funds to make competitive grants to communities across the state to help rehab and stabilize existing homes. In some cases, you can also use those funds to construct new homes for low to moderate income individuals. On the top right are 2 homes in Adel that were improved through the CHIP program. On the bottom right are 3 new homes in Pembroke, down in Bryan County. This year, DCA awarded more than $13 million in CHIP grants to 19 communities. And that was intended to rehab 110 homes, construct another 62. And awardees included communities that you know well: Sylvester, Colquitt, Cochran, Damascus, Millen, Moultrie, the list goes on. Additionally, the CDBG program, Community Development Block Grants, that you're familiar with, also awarded another $4.1 million to rehab 41 homes and construct another 6 or reconstruct 6 that were beyond repair. It's important to preserve what we've got. Last session, you extended the historic preservation tax credit for homes, And particularly in historic areas, and you think about many of our rural communities, this can be an important tool to preserve existing housing. Now, these tax credits do require significant investment from the homeowner, but they can be a catalyst for preservation. Another example of historic preservation, and in this case, we're talking about adapting historic properties to meet our current housing needs. At the top in downtown Bainbridge, this is the second story of a historic building downtown, and it has been converted to housing. Not affordable housing, which we're going to talk about. I believe, Darlene, that these rent for just north of $2,000 a month in Bainbridge. Okay? On the bottom in Pelham is the historic Hand Trading Building. This is the centerpiece of downtown, has been for years. And several years ago, this was converted into 54 mixed income homes, made possible in part through historic tax credits and using housing tax credits for the 44 units that were converted to affordable housing. Now, when we met together some years ago down in Moultrie, you had a presentation from the folks in Hawkinsville talking about other historic investment of housing. This list could go on, but I just want you to remember that preservation is actually key to addressing many of our needs. Last year we did talk a lot about housing credits, and here is another important use as it relates to preservation. Since 1963, USDA has financed more than 533,000 units of housing in rural communities. Over the next decade, almost all of these will roll out of that program. And the projected loss of affordable housing in rural communities is alarming. These properties are home to mostly elderly, senior, and disabled individuals. And the average income for folks in these USDA 515 properties is $13,600 a year. Okay? So our concern, of course, is with the loss of these or the untenable increases in rent or perhaps eviction, where do these people go? Tax credits alone are not the solution here. Tax credits work really well for workforce housing, but at $300 a month in rent, these properties can't sustain the operations that are necessary under tax credits. So they really require vouchers or tenant subsidies. Last week I met with the USDA Rural Housing Director to talk about how we might be able to leverage tax credits to preserve and revitalize the properties, to keep the properties in our communities, but leverage the federal vouchers to operate the facilities. And we're continuing to do that, but we do actually in our tax credit program have a set aside for USDA properties, and these four represent 4 of 13 USDA properties that were just this year preserved using housing tax credits. So tax credits are certainly a vital tool for rural workforce housing. In fact, I learned recently, and this was interesting to me, the state housing tax credit was enacted in 2000. That was the same time, and it was in conjunction with the creation of the One Georgia Authority on purpose. The state housing tax credit and housing tax credits provide a tool to address rural workforce housing in a way that can also be beneficial to our more populated hub communities. By rule, at least 35% of tax credits are awarded in rural communities to finance developments like this. It's a 56-unit property in Tifton. Residents here at Nine Oaks work for Walgreens, the Tift Regional Medical Center, the Crisp County Schools, the State Department of Human Services, the City of Tifton, Sanderson Farms, and Moultrie, and that's just to name a few. Now, this is located right next door to a CDBG-funded community center, across the street from an elementary school, 6 blocks from downtown, and it has been a catalyst for the Public Housing Authority to begin to revitalize their property that's right across the street. Here's another example in Pembroke on the left, workforce housing that was built in 2014 to address a lot of needs in Interstate Center, which is directly across 16 from the new Hyundai Meta plant. On the right is a 60-unit senior housing, or 70-unit senior housing development just downtown. Last point on this, if you remember, the policy objective behind tax credits is not more apartments. The policy objective is housing affordability. So in return for credit subsidy, developers commit to 30 years of affordably priced rent. So here along the coast, and this is either in Port Wentworth or Midway, I can't remember the example, but these properties are literally next door to one another. I dare say, can anyone figure out which one is the tax credit development? Okay, so I would argue that the property on the right, which is a tax credit development, probably has more potential to stand up to after 30 years than the 252 units on the left. The one on the right is 80 units of workforce housing. But to illustrate the point, take a look at the rents. The tax credit carries less debt, which can be passed along in the form of lower rents. Now you got to meet eligibility requirements to live here, and if you don't pay your rent, you get evicted, just like you do next door. But if you look at the rents in the property on the right, which are literally half that on the left, this is key housing for folks that make up our essential workforce, whether that be the folks who work in the groceries, who drive the hospitality industry along the coast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So until last year, DCA's only tool to finance new housing development at any scale were tax credits. And that is, the tax credits are perhaps the best example of public-private partnership. But remember, most folks own the home that they live in, and we have built fewer homes over the last 13 to 15 years than we have added household formation. So to encourage private development of affordably priced homes, you supported the governor's amended FY23 budget recommendation for a $35 million pilot, a new flexible One Georgia housing initiative, which we launched last July, and I'm pleased to report that early returns have been very positive. To date, you can see that we have extended 17 infrastructure awards, as well as several construction loans that are in process. This funding has contributed to a pipeline of more than 1,265 new homes, primarily single-family for-sale housing. The program offers up to $2.5 million in infrastructure grants to communities who are working in partnership with private or nonprofit developers. The construction lending, up to $1 million and no more than 40% of the total financing, is also available. And in return for this investment, the state requires that new homes meet certain affordability criteria, that they're geared to entry-level workforce housing. Any rental units are also required to adhere to affordability standards. Now, the program is only a year old, and grant agreements afford 2 years to fully construct for a construction timeline. But this is a great example of the fruits of our labor. This is completed construction in Columbus. These homes have been sold to a Walmart cashier, a couple of teachers in the community, a handful of folks who work in and around Fort Moore. So a fantastic development, and really just the beginning. These homes in the Elliott's Walk subdivision have sold in the $160,000 to $180,000 price range. And one thing that I have found interesting, though perhaps not surprising in this program, is, in fact, many of the communities that have been able to move quickly to tap into this resource have already been active participants in other housing initiatives. For example, many are alumni of the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing. That's a fantastic partnership between DCA, the Georgia Municipal Association, and the University of Georgia that is supported by many of the folks in this room, and it helps communities to prepare for growth and to contemplate their housing needs. Almost every one of the investments that we have made have also, interestingly, been within close proximity to existing tax credit development. Now, the Rural Workforce Housing Initiative is designed to be flexible and community driven. So, every time we go into a community, we're looking and listening and trying to understand their needs. But there are a few interesting themes that have come out from my perspective. One, and this is most prominent in communities that are seeking to develop in and around their downtown core, is the notion of density. There are at least 3 or 4 communities who have ongoing development on reclaimed property that they are putting to new use. In this particular case, this is 3.5 acres of land 2 blocks away from the downtown core not far from here. And when the authority approved this award, there was a lot of intrigue that you could build 39 homes, not tiny homes, these are 1,800 square foot homes, that you could build 39 homes on 3.5 acres. And guess what? You can't unless you think differently. Now, this is not a downtown development, but it does help frame and illustrate some of the issues when it comes to land use. When we met with this community and the developer, our team challenged them as to whether 79 homes was the most efficient use of 78 acres of land. Now, once you factor out wetlands and some of the community infrastructure requirements, the streets and so forth, this represents lots that range from a little north of half an acre to a little bit north of an acre in size. As we challenged them, we were reminded that all of these homes will be built on septic, so the lot size is a requirement. Now, for a comparison, a 14-acre in-town development in a nearby community will yield 37 similarly sized and similarly priced homes. And in that case, those homes actually blend in with the neighboring community, although they're on smaller lots, because all of the neighboring community in that city was built on septic. By connecting this development to sewer and to water infrastructure, you can build more efficiently. In this case, not this case, but the one next door, on quarter-acre lots. And if you need to build more housing and you also want to preserve land, you've got to invest in infrastructure and be thoughtful about the efficient use of land. And that's perhaps a good segue to my friend and colleague Hunter Hill, but I will stop here and say thank you again, and I'm happy to entertain any questions. I don't know how much time I've still got, but thank you for listening to me today.
Chairman Green.
Thank you. Commissioner, in rural Georgia, we are facing a major crisis. After we built these homes, we built 30 some odd homes over a couple of years ago, and they, in the agreement, they said you will rent these for 15 years and then you can purchase these homes. Well, in the meantime, the project was sold 3 times, and now the rent has moved from $300 to $900, and most of them are being evicted. And I don't know how we work to make this particular part something that we need to review and try to help these individuals. Others are faced with, they start out with the dream home and then events change. One of the partners dies, and now they are faced with mortgage increase and at the same time being evicted. South Georgia has more evictions than any other region because of the inability to meet these financial needs. What do we do in something like this?
Right. There's a lot to the question, Chairman Green. I'll start with the fact that housing is a predominantly private sector activity, and so it's difficult in the case that you described where rents have increased from $300 to $900. It's difficult to think about where to interject there. In programs that are administered that involve federal or state funds.
And these were?
Well, I'd like to talk offline to make sure that we fully understand the details, but in cases where there are federal or state funds, there are some limitations about the rental increases. We certainly, and those are all pegged to market conditions, and over the last couple of, I heard somebody talking about increases in property tax assessment. Same can be said on the rent side. The rents have continued to increase, and that creates a problem, particularly for those on fixed incomes. On the Georgia Dream, and I don't know if you were talking specifically about Georgia Dream, but the Georgia Dream program has a very low foreclosure rate, and that in large part has to do with the homebuyer education that goes with that and all of the financing tools that are wrapped around that. But you're right, over the last handful of years, we've seen homes where it was purchased with two income family, and one of the family members passed away, and all of a sudden that becomes unsustainable. There is a program, and it was stimulus funded. It's called the Homeowner Assistance Fund, and we still have a little bit of money and a little bit of runway left in that program, which is actively marketed around the state to help those homeowners get current on their mortgage and get back into a sustainable payment stream. So happy to talk to you about that. The example you offered, which is really almost a rent-to-own model, is a really challenging model that I don't see a lot of success with that around the state, and we don't use that a lot. And part of that has to do, as you said, with changes in ownership structure and agreements and things like that. But if we can talk offline, that would be great.
Great.
Chairman Hatchett.
You had a slide that had a facility on the left and on the right. The rent was about half on the right than it was on the left, 280, yeah, that one. Are the tax credits for the facility on the right, are those state or federal?
Both.
Okay, so part of the state money.
Part state, part federal.
So then a couple more later, you're talking about the 34 million that we put in for the workforce housing. Go back. How much of that have we used?
Yeah, so I talked about the $35 million pilot. So these numbers are reflective through June of this year. So this is the majority of the funds that were included in the amended FY23 budget. I'm not reporting because it hadn't come to the authority until our next meeting on our next round of grant recommendations. But we have a pipeline of grants that are ready to go, and then we've got a pipeline of activity behind that. We make these awards on a quarterly basis, and there is significant demand all across the state. I'll share a quick story because we did a site visit yesterday in North Georgia. It's a community that ironically is experiencing growth, right? They're growing, they've got a lot going on. But if you look at the demographics in the community, the majority of their growth and the majority of their population is 55 and older. Okay? Now, what they want in that community is they want the next generation. I think David talked a little bit about our grandchildren. Like they want to see there's no housing for those folks to move back into the community. We met with a developer, and one of his employees actually is from this town, is currently living in Atlanta, wants to move home, and he works there, but he can't afford to live there. So the demand for this program is significant, and this is a great way to address the single-family need, the need for us to build more affordable for-sale properties in the state. Did I answer your question?
I'm sure you will offline. So you haven't really touched on this, but I'm gonna say it. There's not anybody, I think, sitting around these tables that are not experiencing homeless issues in their communities. And I even, on the way up here yesterday, was called by a constituent that I've never met. He was calling me about working homeless, which I think is something that this or even others. So I hope that we continue to put a light on that situation and do what we can there too. I don't have the answer, and I hope y'all will help. Let's work toward that to help that issue also.
If I could just speak to that really quickly, and first of all, I want to thank Katie for her attention to this matter. And somebody spoke earlier, I think it was your mayor, spoke about the fact that when we closed state hospitals and lost facilities to address people who have real significant needs, that really did create some challenges in our state around homelessness. There's also a pressure when there's not enough housing that addresses some of those people. When you talk about working homeless, my leadership team spent the last 2 days at Unicoi in Helen at a leadership retreat. Right outside our conference room, one day was this really nice family, 4 kids, all kind of elementary, middle school age. They were working on their iPads, whatever. The mom was kind of lounging, but very astutely supervising the kids. They weren't disheveled. They weren't. They seemed to be fairly enterprising. At a break, one of my directors was over talking to them, and when he came back, he said, "I actually met them 3 weeks ago when we were camping here. They don't have a home. The kids are in school online. The parents are clearly, they've got their car, they're paying for their campsite. They don't have access to a home, whether it be for rent or for sale, that they can afford." So part of the solution is everything that you are doing that we have talked about. And then I think that there's also work that we can do on some interim solutions that are a little bit complicated by the DOJ. So thanks for bringing that up. And I'm sorry I didn't talk about it.
Chair Lisa Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know that home ownership, and I think David mentioned this earlier, is a key to prosperity for individuals and families alike. And a concern that I have is large investment groups that are purchasing single-family homes and are then renting them. So essentially taking that home off the market for someone who could own it one day and that be part of their pathway to success. So I'm wondering, does any of this grant money that we're talking about or tax incentives, do they go strictly to the individuals who are buying these homes, or are these large investment groups also eligible to receive this money?
No, and I appreciate your narrowing that down, because I thought you were going to ask me to talk about rent-to-own homes. You're just asking specific, but thank you very much. I was trying to figure out how to dodge that. Well,
maybe I should ask you about that.
So I think we're out of time. But so first of all, no, we protect against that. I will tell you that the whole notion of rent to own is an interesting conundrum, because if you're just buying up existing housing stock to prevent first-time home buyers from getting in, it's a problem. If you're helping to build more housing stock, perhaps it's part of a solution, because we need more homes. With this program, with any state funds that go into housing, the production of housing, we have protected against investor ownership by requiring that the properties be homeowner occupied. So the person who purchases purchases it has to live in it. So I appreciate that, and it's something that's very much on our.
Okay, thank you.
on
That's
our
good to
radar.
hear. Thank you.
Chairman Bill Yordan.
Commissioner, thank you for being with us. Great program. I appreciate your hard work toward housing in the state of Georgia. Matter of fact, I think I was a recipient of one of those original Georgia Dream grants. I don't think it was called that in the day, but I think interest rates at that time, and I think it was 83, were 18% mortgage rates, and I think I got it for 14, and I thought I did good. And folks today say 7's high, so they don't know. But in our community, we've had a number of loft apartments over downtown businesses and, over retail spaces, and that's been pretty successful in our community. It really does several things. It brings people downtown. It encourages more retail. It also, in our communities, encouraged more restaurants downtown, which has been a real win and something we really needed. Also provides people being there, and I think security for the businesses with people around. So that's been a real win. I know there are historic tax credits for doing these type things. Are there other things that communities can do, or you could suggest that they could do to encourage this? Because I think if that's a really good thing, because downtowns are so important, central business districts are so important to our communities, but to have people living downtown is a big plus. A gentleman that you probably know actually did the Bainbridge building, has done some in our community, done about 20 and working on about 18 more. But, how can we encourage more of that in our communities? Because that's a win-win, I think, for, it's already there. It makes perfect sense to have that retail or office space down below and housing above.
Right. Well, and I appreciate your highlighting the point, and you're right. Like, taking advantage of what we've got matters. Our downtown development team, many of your Main Street communities are very attuned to the benefits of housing downtown. Preserving the historic credits are a big part of that, because it is not cheap to build housing, and it is certainly more expensive when you're trying to preserve historic assets in your downtowns. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I think that Larry Hanson may touch a little bit on this later this afternoon. Using some of the tools that are in place, the Downtown Development Revolving Loan Fund programs and the Georgia Cities program and the like, there are ways that you can invest not only in revitalizing your commercial downtown, but also the second floor housing. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for reiterating the issue. Thank you.
Commissioner, we certainly thank you for the presentation. You see the questions that we have and the concern that we have, and your work and your staff's work is much appreciated. Thank you for all that you're doing for the state of Georgia.
On behalf of our team, thank you for your continued support and for your time today.
Thank you so much. Now we will hear from an individual that has certainly made an imprint upon the state of Georgia, that has worked so hard for our cities and counties. This is our Georgia Environmental Finance Authority Executive Director, Hunter Hill. And Hunter, we're just delighted to have you here today.
Well,
if anyone understands government, you should.
Yeah, I should. Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Green, and thank all of you, and Chairman Dempsey. Thank you for being our wonderful hostess. It's always beautiful to be back in Rome, but it's great to see some friends, and I look forward to this conversation. And I'll jump right in because I know I'm right before lunch. This does remind me, however, that most of the real work in the General Assembly is in the House.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, GFA oversees two main functions, energy and the state's energy office. and the state revolving fund and water. And our mission is to conserve and improve Georgia's energy, land, and water resources. I know that the main concept on people's minds is water infrastructure, and Dr. Gaddy did such an awesome job explaining the energy challenges. And since the recent passing of the Inflation Acceleration Act, I did want to touch on some, thank you, touch on some of the things that Georgia has to administer. I mean, so I made a joke about the act, but the fact is that Georgia has been the recipient of billions of dollars of federal funds. And while we may not have all voted for it if we were in Washington, it's our job to administer it as best we can to help Georgians. And I want to talk about some of the programs that we're managing there. So this is what our Energy Resource Division does, State Energy Program, the Weatherization Assistance Program for low-income homeowners, the Fuel Storage Tank Division, and then all of these below are new programs as a result of federal legislation and resources. Home energy rebates, EECBG, which is the Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant, and then EERLF Capitalization Grant, and then grid resiliency programs where we are working with the EMCs and Georgia Power to make the grid more resilient. These are the specific amounts of dollars that we have, and one of the things, just so you should know as legislators, your state's energy office is a pretty high return investment on dollars because there's no state funding. Everything that we administer in the state as it relates to energy is federally funded 100%. But you can see all the different money. The biggest one is the home energy rebates, $220 million, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Main reason I want to tell you all about it is because some of these programs truly can benefit some of your constituents if they want to participate in these programs. So the EECBG is money that was allocated, is about $2.9 million for local communities to administer these funds in a way to focus on energy efficiency within their government. If they wanted to do construction upgrades or put solar on their roof or whatever they wanted to do to lower their energy costs, these are grants for them to be able to do so. We didn't get a ton of money on there, so we had to restrict the amount to, I loved what Dr. Bridges said about spreading the jelly so thin no one even can taste it. We highlighted the groups that could get this money so that if they got it, that it would be something. And so is $150,000